This episode is brought to you by VMGVinyl.com. Professional record cleaning, restoration, rejuvenation, and grading. Refresh your records with VMGVinyl.com.
And now, on with the show.
Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 450 of The Vinyl Guide. 450. That's a bit of a milestone. Wow, those numbers just keep adding up. We're so very proud of this podcast, and I'm so thankful for each and every listener. Some of you have been here since the beginning or near the beginning, and some of you are just recent discoverers of this podcast. But really, I want to thank each of you and each of your ears. Well, the working ones anyway. Thank you to your ears. Thank you to the other ears. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, every so often, we here on The Vinyl Guide are able to break some big news for record nerds. And here on the show, this week, by golly, it's going to be one of those weeks. And you're going to want to take note. Write this down, okay? Friday, May 31st, 2024, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Vinyl pre-orders will be live for the official reissue of Fraction Moonblood on Riding Easy Records. And I'll give you those links here in a little bit. But just in case you need a bit of a backstory, you know, most civilians will have never heard of the band Fraction and their 1971 LP Moonblood. But many record nerds are very keenly aware of this album. Only 200 copies were pressed at the time of its release. And original copies of Moonblood now go for thousands of dollars. Very expensive record, and with good reason. It's got that combination of great music, strange story, and extreme rarity. These are three things record collectors want to see, and Fraction Moonblood has all of these in spades. And because of the extraordinarily high price and scarcity of this record, Fraction Moonblood has been bootlegged for decades. And a lot of those bootlegs are really bad quality. I had one for years because that was the only copy I think I could ever have. I mean, the chances of me being able to get my hands on one of those 200 originals was well out of my price range. However, those of us who've wanted an excellent copy of Fraction Moonblood are now in luck. The team at Riding Easy Records, the guys that bring you the Brown Acid compilation series, they've struck a deal to have the first official reissue of Fraction Moonblood. I think it's the first in over 2 decades. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. This is a huge achievement. And today we're going to hear the tale of this album, its origin story. We're going to talk about its popularity, and of course the hoops that were jumped through to secure the official reissue. And we're talking to 3 very well-known names in the record collecting community. Mr. Dillon Smith of Noble Records, Lance Barresi of Permanent Records, and Daniel Hall of Riding Easy Records. These 3 gentlemen are joining us today. They're going to take us through what is known about Fraction Moonblood, the lore, the collectability, and the journey to get it reissued. And just so you know, there's an extended version of this interview available at patreon.com/vinylguide, some extra 15 or 20 extra minutes or so, where we cover several more details regarding Fraction Moonblood, as well as the uber rare Stonewall album. And that part of the discussion is only available to show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. Please consider becoming a sponsor of the show. That would be absolutely lovely. Okay, again, write this down. Friday, May 31st. 2024, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern time. The vinyl pre-sales will go online, and set an alarm on your phone right now. Don't be all, I'll remember it without the alarm, because I'm here to tell you, you may not, and then you'll be kicking yourself. So make a phone alarm a reminder for you for Friday, May 31st, 2024, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern time. Here are the links of which you'll want to go to. There's ridingeasyrex.com, noblerecordstore.com, and permanentrecordsla.com. There's different vinyl pressings, different numbers, which we're going to talk about here in the episode, but have those links handy, even bookmarked in your browser. All right, you got those sites down, all bookmarked? Great. So let's get into it. Let's hear the story of the origin, the legacy, and the reissues of Fraction Moonblood with Dillon, Lance, and Daniel.
All right, well, gentlemen, we are gathered here today to talk about Fraction Moonblood. And this is a record that has so much lore. It has so much story behind it, perhaps some conjecture. And it's coming out, I think, May 31st. Daniel,
May 3rd. Yeah, we were hoping to start shipping them on May 31st, but pre-sale is kicking off on May 31st, and we are it should be shipping by the end of June. So
got it. Okay.
Yeah, we've had we can, as we talk about this, we can talk about all of the production hiccups we've had trying to mimic the cover. And I don't know if, amongst us, we've been talking about this Fraction record so much that I think it's like common knowledge what the packaging looks like. But if you don't know what it looks like, it's got this clear red window in the front that Dillon is holding up right now, and it's a very unique package, and it's really been tough to, and Lance has one too, it's been a very tough thing to recreate the original. It's taken us many months and several back to the drawing board. So here we are. But.
Well, I do want to talk about that because it's a Mylar thing, and it was made originally in 1971, and it's difficult to replicate in 2024. Yeah,
I think there's all these it must be petroleum based or something, but I think there's all these new. It's just you can't just go to the craft store and pick up a roll of it. So, anyways,
and that's a good point to bring up, though, Nate. Can you imagine a scenario where in 1971 you're putting together DIY style records that are made this way that people in the 21st century are having a hard time putting together? Not only design wise, but just the actual fabrication of it. That's
materials.
One of the most mind blowing parts about the whole package.
It's like when you find out the Mayans had this amazing calendar that tracked all the stars and everything.
Yes.
You're like, how the hell did
they back in time and having to find plutonium?
So we will get to that, but first let's kind of wind back a little bit. Now, Fraction Moonblood, it's a record that came out in 1971. The band is Fraction. Where was Fraction from?
Los
Angeles, baby.
Yeah, they recorded in a studio in Glendale, actually.
Okay, so what's kind of their origin story?
Yeah, so Fraction is a group of working class guys. You got Jim Beach on vocals. You got pardon me, my eyesight isn't what it used to be. Bob Meinl on guitar, on first guitar. And it's, just to kind of rewind a little bit, the history and the lore of Fraction is muddied even further by the fact that Jim Beach, the one surviving member of Fraction, really doesn't have time or any interest in discussing his band from 1971. So we contacted Jim Beach to license this album, Daniel and I did. And even though we've worked out this deal with him and he's given us permission and Daniel has paid him and so forth, he does not have 30 minutes to have this phone call right now. So he's a busy man. He has moved on with his life and is not looking back to the past. So we're here to do our best to kind of tell the story of this album without any of the actual band members on board. So,
yeah. So are the rest of the members, aside from Jim, they're passed? He's the only surviving member?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
And that's the general. And Daniel, I don't remember if we talked to Jim about this specifically or not, but that's the impression that I get is that Jim, well, not only was he the singer, he also put the album art together. He was the one behind the whole
the creative force. Yeah, he was definitely the creative force on it for sure. And we've only had, I think, 2 phone calls with him. Like the rest has been email and text, and he lives like 45 minutes away from us. We've offered to try to meet up for lunch, but he is a very busy man and got stuff going on. Totally respect that, and we're just like that he trusts us with his legacy. So.
Do you feel that he's there's some ill feelings towards the project? Because if he doesn't want to share about it or anything like that, is I don't know any insight as to his opinion of the project?
I don't get that impression. I feel like just like a lot of the guys that we work with in Brown Acid, or for the Brown Acid compilation series, Daniel and I, you get every kind of bit of the spectrum of interest. So you can have guys that straight up don't want to have anything to do with the project, the reissue of their music, because there is ill will or bad vibes or bad memories involved with that, to guys like Gary Del Vecchio who are embracing it wholeheartedly and are living their dream by having had their unreleased material.
The same thing is happening right now with like Backjack and the Parchment Farm guys and stuff like that. It's like they're super excited, but we've had other ones where people are like, just give me the money, dude. Do what you guys are going to do. And like, I don't think they ever expect to even hear from us again. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of like past and beyond. So yeah, Jim is definitely probably the busiest that we've had. Like somebody who's just absolutely just like, hey, do what you guys are going to do. Make sure that you don't fuck it up. But I'm not involved.
Okay. All right. So going back to 1971 or even maybe 1970. What is kind of the origin story of Fraction in terms of kind of it coming together? Do we know about them? Were they playing any gigs? What was kind of pre-Moonblood Fraction looking like?
Because Jim Beach has literally no interest in doing interviews or talking about the band, it is very much up to us to kind of figure that out just based on the information that's available to us, so we can kind of put it into context. We can talk about the label, we can talk about the release itself, but we don't have any photos of the band playing live, and we don't have any show flyers or any other ephemera to share or to prove that the band existed outside of going into the studio in one 3-hour session with no overdubs.
1 3-hour session. I mean, and I think that's definitely part of it. Like when you listen to it, it's like there's bands that might spend weeks or months trying to have a record that sounds as great as this. The fact that the whole thing was done in 3 hours and then they were on their way. That's, I think, one of the most mind-blowing things.
But to me, it's astonishing because, without that kind of understanding of the history, for them just to walk in the studio and create an album like Moonblood, I mean, there must have been some blood and sweat and gigs leading up to it. I respect the fact that we don't know that right now. For all we know, a comet, flew in the atmosphere and the band saw it and decided to record an album. But we don't know if they recorded anything else. To me, it also seems odd that a band would just step right in and start to record a whole album rather than not having a single or something else to kind of lead up to that.
I think they were very well rehearsed, and I think they just went in and they just knew like, hey, we got enough money to pay for this right now. Let's just do everything we can. And that's just kind of what happened.
Do we know if it was self-financed or did the record label pay for it? Do we know anything about that?
Based on the history of Angelus Records, which is just essentially an in-house label of Whitney Recording Studios in Glendale, I think it's pretty fair to assume that the band went and paid for the recording of this album themselves and generally just used the Angelus label because that was available to them as almost like a front instead of just throwing Fraction Records or making up their own label name. They're like, all right, there's some legitimacy. This label, Angelus, has existed. They're allowing us to use this. Why not just kind of take that and add it to the package in a way that, almost like when band members these days will have their management at myband.com, and it's just somebody in the band, right? They don't necessarily have a manager. They don't necessarily have a label. They're just recording at Whitney in Glendale and using the Angelus label the same way a lot of the kind of in-house labels will have released things, quote unquote, even though the band paid for everything. They're just throwing their name on there for legitimacy, I think,
I think it was a gospel label, was it not? And
it was a Christian label.
Yeah, so they were like a Christian rock band, as far as what I've read, which I don't know, I've not talked to any of the guys, but that they were a group of guys from all different parts of town that kind of wanted to start a band that had some like gospel themes that had like a little bit more of a kick to it. And so I don't know how they went to go put it on a gospel label, which seems absolutely insane to me. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's what I like about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it is interesting. And the records primarily, the lyrics are pretty Christian. You know what I mean? Like it's a Christian record for the most part, you know.
In a very subtle and kind of nuanced and apocalyptic and like Old Testament kind of way, not like a
book of Revelation,
Jesus and all that. It's like there are references to religion, not necessarily it being an overtly Christian or pro-Christian album necessarily.
Right. Yeah. I'd listened to it in the past, and it never dawned on me about, any sort of faith motivation behind it. But when I read a little bit more about it, some of the material you sent me, Daniel, and I learned it was, then I listened to it again. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess I could hear that there. But yeah, you're right, Lance. It's not heavy-handed. It's there.
It's not like Striper.
Yeah. It's not a Kirk Cameron musical, right?
No.
Okay, well that's fine. So these guys were of the faith at the time. Do we know about, I guess, their thoughts about what would happen to the record?
I don't know if we know anything about that, but we do know that they were working class guys that were strangely rehearsing before they went to work. Like most guys in bands, people in bands in general, they get up and go to work, and then they have rehearsal afterwards, right? In the evening and into the wee hours of the morning. Not these guys. These guys were getting up before work and just getting super, super heavy at presumably, 6 to 8 a.m., which is really, really unusual and maybe has something to do with the way this record sounds, I think.
Okay. So they went in the studio, they recorded the record. I believe at the time, the first and only pressing of Fraction, for 20 years or whatever, it was 200 copies. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there are varying reports on this. Even in Acid Archives, there's like a bit about how the guitar player told Patrick Lundborg or whoever it is. Yeah, Patrick wrote the actual blurb that there were 1,000 copies. Well, Daniel and I, in preparation for this specific podcast, asked Jim definitively how many copies were pressed, and he said 200, period. That's the only number, and that was the only response we got from him in the email was the number 200 copies. There are 2 copies of the original.
I feel like if there was 1,000 copies out there, I think more people would have them.
Yeah.
Dillon, you've got one. Lance, you've got one. Do you know how, in general, or an idea of how many may exist outside of the ones that you guys have?
How many that are
still exist today?
Yeah. I mean, Lance and I were talking about this other day. Like we know like 6 or 7 people who have them. So so I don't really know what does it say, Dillon?
It says 100 people have them, but man, 100 people
on Discogs.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, but that could exist. I mean, it's not like a record that you would ever leave behind if you were to see it somewhere. I mean,
how many people think they have a real one and it's a boot?
That could be it too.
Good point. Yeah. So it's hard to say, but no more than 102 people have them in their collection on Discogs.
So, do we know, or do we have any idea if they all 200 survived at the time?
Presumably, yeah. There's definitely been no reports of copies being tossed or ending up in a landfill or destroyed the way like an album like Junior and the Solettes was warped in a meat packing shrink wrapper or anything like that. It seems like the band, took great care to produce this album and to create the packaging, and they got these records out into the world in a legitimate way, and they were just sold back in the day.
Because most records that I will see from that era, especially the private press ones, they're very simple. Black and white, maybe one color. It tends to be very simple, very low budget, and understandably so. This one has such a deluxe packaging around it. What do you know about kind of their approach back then to be able to elevate the packaging to where it's at?
Well, we know they were Doors fans, and LA Woman came out just before this album did in 1971. So one has to assume that they were very heavily influenced by that album in general and wanted to recreate that packaging on a DIY level. So they did a pretty remarkable job of putting together a packaging with that Mylar square and then creating an inner sleeve that is really striking and that works really well with that packaging, with all the way down to the red Mylar and the moon, mm-hmm. and then the album being called Moonblood. But again, beyond that, Jim isn't interested in telling us much more of the story. So we just have to assume that that's the case.
No, it says that the packaging or the art direction, it was Jim's kind of brainchild. So on the album credits. So yeah, I would assume he probably pulled his hair out trying to make this vision come true, because we're dealing with legitimate packaging and companies that have a full fucking staff to do this kind of stuff. And we've been having all kinds of problems. Not the die cut square and the printing and all, that's not the problem, but the problem is finding the same thickness of the red. I think it's acetate, it's not Mylar, but nonetheless, whatever that goes on the front. And we got other samples and the clarity was there, but it was too thin. So it was causing it to ripple. And it was nah, dude, we got to make sure we do this right. You know what I mean? So
do we know if they put them together themselves? By the way, I'm going to keep asking questions, and I know a lot of them are going to come back. We don't know. Right.
Oh, I assume I assume they absolutely put them together themselves.
Yeah. Have you guys I mean, I'm assuming Dylan and Lance, you guys have copies. What does it look like? Did they glue them in there? How did that red be affixed to the cover?
Yeah. There's a line of glue on the inside right there.
Yeah.
But I can't really see past that.
I think what they did was it was a panel. I think they razor bladed out the window and then glued it in and then glued the sides together.
Does the window look machine cut or hand cut?
It's really pro looking. It does look machine cut, but hard to say.
They could have gotten a place to create a die to do that. I mean, that technology was absolutely available in 1971.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might have actually been even easier to do back then because stuff like this was just happening more frequently. And
sure.
Yeah.
You had people who had the skills around that could do that, right? It's not a lost art. So, all right. So correct. Let's just quickly pivot to today. Daniel, what sort of, I guess you're the one that's in charge of trying to get the packaging reflective of 1971 standards.
Yeah, I mean, I run the label, so yes, this is the area where I come in and do it. But yeah, it's we got quotes from 4 different places. We got actual samples from 2. Nothing was really jiving. We finally found a place that's doing it for us. And they're called Taylor. They're out of Minneapolis, and they took on the challenge, rose to, said, hey, we can make this happen. But the issue has been finding the acetate. We got a sample back a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and they finally got the thickness right. And they sent me the thing, and I was so excited. And I was like, oh my God, we got something here. And then I took the insert and I put it in, and the clarity on it was super murky. You could kind of see through it, but I was like, oh God, this isn't it. And I called them and I was like, you guys have a bootleg of what we're trying to do. The bootleggers figured this out. You guys need to figure this shit out. You know what I mean? So I think the bootleg that I have is probably from late 90s, early 2000s. That was the last, I don't know. But anyways, So yes, but we started this process, like the production of jackets and research, in August of 2023. So it's May of 2024. We still don't have them here, but lo and behold, I think they've finally cracked the code, and the correct red material is supposed to be at the jacket making place end of next week. So, and they said everything else is printed, cut, sitting there ready to be assembled, and they said that they would have it done in 3 days and it would ship. So there we are.
Very good.
Yeah.
So at the time they pressed these 200 records, they put them together with these probably hand configured packaging, 200 sleeves. How did the band, do we know how the band sold them? How did they get out in public?
Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Hey there, all you record nerds. I want to tell you about BagsUnlimited.com. BagsUnlimited.com has a huge selection of vinyl record supplies. Whether you collect LPs, 7-inch singles, 78 shellacs, or anything in between, BagsUnlimited.com will sort you out. From polyline sleeves to cardboard record mailers to 7-inch storage boxes and archive quality record sleeves, protect your records of any size and shape at BagsUnlimited.com. Whether you have a small personal record collection or you're running a massive record shop, you can grab a small supply or even buy in bulk at BagsUnlimited.com. And they've got some really incredible, unique stuff. BagsUnlimited.com even has special size sleeves made especially to protect your box sets, storage boxes and sleeves for cassette tapes, protective supplies for reel-to-reel, and yes, even 8-tracks. Just go to BagsUnlimited.com, click on audio supplies, and prepare to be impressed by all the options they have. That's BagsUnlimited.com.
At the time they pressed these 200 records, they put them together with these probably hand configured packaging, 200 sleeves. How did the band, do we know how the band sold them? How did they get out in public?
No idea.
Hoobah Records in Pasadena probably had a stack of them. I don't know. It's a great question. We don't. No one knows. Dillon, do you know?
I don't know, but I'm dealing with another album now, the Yezda Urfa Boris, and those guys, like, they were talking about how they didn't want people to know the backstory. They didn't want people to know anything about it because they like that mystique about it. And it does add like an extra layer. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the story of this album, but I think that, there's got to be a reason why they don't want to talk about it. But that mystique of like just sitting here holding this freaking thing, like, man, how did this happen? Where did it come from? So I think that's a huge element of it. It does add, it kind of makes your imagination fill in the gaps in a cool way. So maybe that's what they're doing. I don't know, but I don't.
Do you think it's intentional?
I think it is. That's my theory.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You guys have talked to him. I'm just guessing.
That's a pretty reasonable theory. If what is it? If the legend's more interesting than the truth, then print the legend.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, but I don't get the impression that Jim is really into this lore building, or do you think he kind of gets, he's interested in playing those sort of games?
Hard to say, but he definitely doesn't want to talk about it. So it's either he's so busier than Daniel and Dillon and I are, or he likes the story that's been told and wants to keep that as the truth.
So is it possible that he don't remember? I mean, because a lot of these guys,
that's very possible. Yeah,
50 years ago, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember last Thursday. Jeez. Yeah. So, but it could also be a thing to where, he doesn't want to remember. I don't know if he has any bitterness towards the record.
I don't.
Could happen. It could be a reminder that his musical career just didn't take off. He was hoping that record was going to do it. He did make one comment when we were talking about this, Lance, and you were on the phone when he did, but he said, he's like, I think we were asking him like what happened, and he's like, basically what happened is that the band didn't take off and it was time for Jimmy to get a job. That's pretty much what he said. So, that was one thing that stuck out to me that he said. I don't know if I don't think it's a negative thing, but I just think he's just kind of like, dude, that was like so long ago. Like I have like grandkids, like I got a life, I have a successful business. He's an architect. Like, it's like, I don't do that shit anymore. I'm done. So, happy to license it to you guys and you guys pay me on time and do me right. But like, I'm like, he hasn't been involved at all, really.
Because the way that I read it, and again, you guys have done far more research, so correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but all 5 members of Fraction, 4 plus the percussion, there's no other credits for them. It's almost like this record happened with no story leading up to it, and then something happened, or all of them just got discouraged or something, and they never did anything since.
Yeah, that's true, and that's really not that unusual when it comes to private press albums and 45s. Like, you can go look at the discography on Discogs for the majority of the records that Daniel and I have comped on Brown Acid. Same exact story.
Yeah, the only record they ever played on was that 145.
Yeah. And, that happens with major label records as well. Like the Gandalf LP, same deal. These guys, they played in a band called Gandalf. They put out one record, amazingly, on Capitol Records, and then they never did anything else. And even though it seems unusual, I think it's probably not that unusual because people, have they start families and get careers and move on, and that's it. Maybe continue to play music on a local level in cover bands, but you're not going to see reference to that on Discogs, for example.
Yeah. And also we have to remember what a record is. A record and a recording is basically a snapshot in time of where that song was at the time. It was like, hey dude, let's all throw in a couple bucks and we're going to let's just go jam these tunes out that we've been practicing. And like, that kind of stuff happened probably quite a bit.
So on that topic, and I know you've got, in this reissue, there's some extra tracks.
Well, for the digital there is, but for the LP, we are keeping it the standard 5. Okay. But yeah, there was some extra tracks that did not make it onto the original pressing.
What's the story of those?
Again, Dillon, you want to chime in? Go ahead.
Well, they were recorded in a storage unit in 1971 as well. I guess it was a rehearsal or something that they had recorded in Hollywood that they were playing in a storage unit. That's all I know.
But it was not the same. It wasn't the same session as the 5 songs that are.
These aren't outtakes. These aren't outtakes. No. These are
and these came to life when Mexican Summer reissued the record in 2010, and it came with a separate 10-inch along with it with those songs on it.
So, how did Mexican Summer get those? Do we know the origin of those recordings? Did Jim have a tape?
Jim had them. Jim had them. Those did come from Jim. Those were not previous. No, maybe they were previously available. Actually, they were.
If you go back all the way to 1999, the LA-based record store Rockaway Records, which is Gary and his brother. I'm forgetting Gary's last name right now. It doesn't matter. Rockaway in Silver Lake.
Yes,
that store has been there for ages, and on the Rockaway CD there are 3 bonus tracks, and those tracks were put on a 10-inch when Mexican Summer did the only other, up until that time, legitimate release. So there are 3 legitimate. Yeah, there you go, Danny.
Here is the Rockaway. I have the CD. These guys have the vinyl. I have the CD. There you go. Dillon might have a Rockaway CD too. You never know. He's a completist.
I don't have any CDs, man.
I have the Mexican Summer one right here, though.
So yeah, those recordings were originally, well, they were released for the first time in 1999 on the Rockaway CD, and then Mexican Summer used that same master for their their LP and bonus 10-inch release, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to be fair, those tracks are not especially great. They don't really fit the vibe of the LP. They're definitely rehearsal level recordings that are not fully formed, and they're cool. And, I think it's great that we have them on the digital streaming side, but yeah,
they'll be on the CD version as well. They're not on the vinyl.
Not everything needs to be on vinyl, let's be real.
So, 1971 comes, 200 records are pressed. They get distributed somehow. Seemingly, Fraction's forgotten about. Everyone kind of splinters, fragments. They start creating their lives. At what point does Fraction start to come back into focus? Is there a moment or an article or something that started really kind of raising the eyebrows of record collectors around Fraction?
I would guess in the 80s and 90s, when you have collectors like Paul Major doing his Feel the Music catalog, his mail order catalog, and then you have collectors like Jeffrey Weiss and Rich Haupt, digging into the deepest, darkest depths of the vinyl record world. That's when records like Fraction and Stonewall and Raven, etc., they are finally
Population 2 and whatever, right? Yeah, like all of that stuff
being appreciated by a new generation of people who may have even been the same age as the guys in Fraction, but they're record dealers and record collectors, right? And then you have guys like Patrick Lundborg, starting to compile what became the reviews that are in Acid Archives. And I don't think we can really talk about the story of talk about the story of Fraction without talking about Acid Archives. Without Acid Archives, people like Dillon and Daniel and I, we don't know about Fraction unless we bought the CD reissue in 1999. That book is the Bible for obscure and private pressing American rock records. And straight up, there's 2 in the back of the book. There are 2 contributors, Mike Asherman and one other guy, who included in their top 10 releases that are included in the Acid Archives. And not only that, the review, and we could read this whole thing if you want, Nate, but the review for Fraction starts by saying, "The underground heavy psych monster to conquer them all!" Exclamation. That is the
highest accolade you can get.
Yeah. And it's not hyperbole. That's legit. Everybody who's ever heard this record agrees with that statement. And that's pretty unique to this particular record. There's disagreements in the reviews in Acid Archives on both sides that they're overhyped or underrated. But this record, Fraction Moonblood, has always been heralded as one of the greatest private pressings of all time. Whether you consider it a private pressing or not, because it did technically come out on a label, quote unquote, the band, it was an independent release outside of the major label record industry. And that's how the snowball reputation of Fraction has kind of how it started and how it has continued to pick up over the years.
Dillon, you look like you were going to say something there for a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, in Acid Archives, if you've read it, how many times do you like, all right, I'm going to read about my favorite album, and you go in there and it's like overhyped, not that good, and you're like, what? And so that's like pretty common. They're very, very critical of things, and they just sing the praises of Fraction Moonblood. But I think, like even in early 2000s, 2004, 2005, if you look at pops, like they're still going for $1,200, $1,500 then. I just think it's one of those albums that you pick it up and you look at it, you're like, I got to hear this. And then the second you drop the needle on it, it's completely mind blowing from start to finish. I just think it is unmistakable that you would pick it up if you saw it. So,
yeah. And I think it's in many ways, I think it's a record the Doors wish they made, and they did. And I know that that's probably going to piss some people off, but to me, it's kind of got what's cool about the Doors and then all this other better shit. You know what I mean? So, but I would say the vocals definitely, if you're into Jim Morrison vocals, then you will like the Fraction record for sure.
There's one track I was listening to the other day. It's like that. It's complete Doors. You could almost have it on L.A. Woman or something like that. It's so connected.
This bird is extremely Doors influenced, but what I like about private pressings in general is that the band and their vision is what you actually hear. There's no filter, there's no veto, there's no producer getting in the way of the band's vision and what you are actually getting,
or label.
Or label, etc. And the creative control is unadulterated. And that's, I think, what Daniel is saying is like, if the Doors could have made the record they had in their minds, it might have sounded more like Moonblood than L.A. Woman. But that said, there's a huge difference. Like this band, and I think Dillon has described Moonblood as sounding like if the Doors and Black Sabbath had a baby, right? I don't think that's incorrect. But part of the reason this record doesn't sound more like the Doors and why it's so much heavier than the Doors is because you don't have Ray Manzarek's keyboards on there in place of the bass guitar. And the bass guitar, that brother, or is it, I forget. There are two brothers in the band.
Vic Hammond.
Kurt Swanson and Don Swanson. I'm sorry, that's drums and guitar. But Bob Meinl and the Vic Hemme on bass and Kurt Swanson rhythm section is unstoppable. And the reason Moonblood sounds way heavier than any Doors album, even though there are similarities.
Yeah, dude, they're tight, man. They're super tight. That's why I say, like, they must have been very, very well rehearsed to do all of that in 3 hours. I mean, it's a lot of work, man. It's crazy.
One take, no overdub.
Yeah.
The guitar solos are so like driving and melodic, and they shred a little bit, but it's just magic. It's just different, It's different than Sabbath, obviously different than the Doors, but it's hard to put it in a box and describe it as the Doors meet Black Sabbath, whatever. That's the best way I know to describe it, but it's so much different than that in reality. Just the way the guitar, like, it kind of leads it in a lot of parts and passages. It's just cool. It's different.
Yeah. The wah and fuzz leads are out of control. And, hip hop producers would be stoked to hear there's even a drum break on Come Out of Her, which is just like, this record has everything.
Ticks all the boxes.
It does tick all the boxes. That's why we're all so excited to talk about it. We're just talking over each other.
Yeah.
I know.
Moonblood's an album that, look, in a lot of really rare records, sometimes there's a reason they're rare, right? and like you said, Lance, sometimes, the band's vision, but also the budget that they have sometimes won't get them kind of where they want to go. But Moonblood absolutely delivers. Now, up until this point, up until the Riding Easy mix that I've heard, I had a bootleg. In fact, I bought it at Rockaway, not to get him in trouble for selling bootlegs, but that was the only one I could afford. And it was really kind of anemic. It really kind of felt kind of thin. This mix of it, this version that you guys have is full of life. Tell me about how you got that sound and what the source was and how you made it sound as good as it does.
Hey there, I gotta tell you about the Groove Washer. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The Groove Washer is the best record cleaner you can get. And if you have a vinyl collection, you need to keep it clean. Dirt and dust lead to groove wear, which affects the sound and value of your record collection. Use the Groove Washer to clean before each play, and your ears and future pocketbook will thank you. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store, or go direct to groovewasher.com and use promo code VinylGuide10 at checkout. Groove Washer is a great holiday gift. Why not send one to a friend? groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10. Do it now. Well, hey there, record collectors. There's a new service available that specializes in record cleaning, restoring, sticker removal, and professional grading.
VMGvinyl.com.
VMG Vinyl can help you make the most of your collectible records. From professional cleaning of records and sleeves,
Removing old price tags and store stickers.
dry cleaning and rejuvenation of old shrink wrap to make it look like new, even providing you a professional play-tested third-party grade with either removable grading or encasing in plastic. You have a wide range of choices at vmgvinyl.com.
Buying a highly collectible record and you want it checked out by an expert?
VMG Vinyl can do that too. Head over there now and see what vmgvinyl.com can do for you and your collection. That's vmgvinyl.com, the one-stop shop for professional third-party grading, cleaning, and record restoration. That's vmgvinyl.com.
This mix of it, this version that you guys have is full of life. Tell me about how you got that sound and what the source was and how you made it sound as good as it does.
The source was, funny enough, the Rockaway CD. And what we did was we had Nick Townsend spend a day on it, and he went through and listened. We listened to whatever versions of it we could get our hands on. So we had bootlegs, and we had the Mexican Summer version, and some and that was, we said, okay, well, we have to make sure that it sounds better than these things if it's possible to do. And I think that he really did a great job on it. I know the digital masters sound really good. Test pressings are there. I don't have an original fraction to A/B it with, but Dillon, you've heard the test pressing. You have one. What are your thoughts on it when it compares to the OG?
It's really strong. I think it's better than the Mexican Summer. And then I at the time had in the shop that picture disc bootleg, which is
there's a picture disc too. I didn't know that.
Dude, it's bad. Anyways, but and so I kind of listened to all of them. There's definitely a little bit of magic that the original has that you can't replicate, but for what it is, I think it sounds incredible. But I mean, go ahead, Lance. You've heard it too, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, the Rockaway CD, there are no master tapes. They don't exist. Jim does not have them, etc. So the Rockaway CD, which is like the first and as good as you can possibly get, was a needle drop off of an original pressing. And you're right, even the Acid Archives review, Dillon mentions how much presence the OG has. But that said, unless you have $5,000 to $10,000 to throw at an OG and you get lucky, you don't have a choice. You have to pick the best possible scenario. And taking the master from a needle drop and running it through a Grammy award-winning audio restoration like Daniel did for the reissue on Riding Easy is probably your best possible scenario.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I mean, I'm very pleased with the digital and how it's like streaming and all that stuff too. I mean, it's great. You know what I mean? So
okay, Acid Archives comes out, and the album's already being bootlegged as early as the 80s, I would say. Does that sound right? The album's being bootlegged. And Mexican Summer, I think, had the first official
legitimate.
Okay. Any idea how that happened? Jim, they contacted Jim, very similar to how you did, Daniel? Or
I'm sure they tracked Jim down. It probably took several tries. I don't imagine it happened after one phone call, but yeah, I think
Jeffrey Weiss was definitely involved in the Mexican Summer reissue. He gets thanked in the liner notes, and yeah, kudos to Jeffrey Weiss. He's a local legend. He's the record collector to beat all record collectors. If you've ever been to his place, his collection is unbelievable, and it's not just like obscure, oddball, private pressings. Jeffrey likes mainstream releases on major labels and all different genres, and everything from recordings dating back to the dawn of the recording industry till today. You know, he's like the biggest fan of Car Seat Headrest that I know, and loves Amyl and the Sniffers, and keeps up with new music in a way that most record collectors definitely do not. And he's a good friend of mine, and he deserves a lot of accolades for being the kind of resource and archivist that he is. He is an absolute legend in the record collecting world, and he keeps to himself. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, or like really kind of, he's not on social media or anything like that. He just does what he does, and he has been doing it for a very long time, and he is a genius and a legend. Absolutely.
He doesn't flex on the gram.
I don't even know if he has an Instagram account.
It's not flexing, it's sharing. It's
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dillon,
educate.
Dillon, I know this record is quite close to your heart. Tell me a little bit from your perspective, your journey. Obviously, you've read about this record. How difficult was it to find your copy? Tell me about your journey with the record.
Well, it kind of fell in my lap. I always loved the album. I got the Mexican Summer reissue a long time ago, back when it was like the cost of a regular album. You know, now it's gone up to like $100-$150, something like that. But I always wanted one, and it's just one of those things. Like when I was a kid, my dad was a pastor, and so he wouldn't let me listen to anything but Christian music. So I would always try to skate around and find like cool Christian music, but there really wasn't any. And so like I would burn CDs that would be like Black Sabbath, and I'd write like DC Talk on it. So he went. But anyway, so that's kind of carried into my adult life, I guess. And it's just interesting to see like what cool albums there are. So I have a whole collection of like weird Christian psychedelic stuff, just because it was such a weird movement. That was a strange marriage of two worlds. Anyways, so I always love the album. It's super heavy. It stands out in that genre to me, in any genre really, but very unique. All that to be said, it was just always one of my absolute favorite ones. And I had I can't remember. I think the shop was open for like 1 year, and I came home from work one day. We had a record day, the most we ever made in one day. I was like really excited. I felt like I finally had a career that I could support my family with and enjoy what I was doing. It was just like a really huge milestone. And then I get home from work, and I remember opening up my phone and clicking on eBay, and there's a Fraction Moonblood there. And I was like, it's always one of those records you never are ever going to get.
Let's get the family right back into debt. Let's do
well, no, I mean, I was just like, I was at the point where I could pay something for it, but not, I mean, I'm not paying $5,000 for it or anything like that at this time. And so I just kind of sent the guy a message. I was like, hey, you want to sell this sucker right now? And we talked back and forth, and he's like, yeah, I found this thing at a yard sale, man. I paid $2 for it.
Oh my God.
I got a really good deal on it, a deal I don't think you could get today. And the rest is history. I think after that, the prices on them started going really nuts. I think the last like near mint one I heard went for $12,000. So it's just nuts. I didn't pay anywhere near that for it. I got a really killer deal.
I'm sure your video helped boost that the awareness of
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Dillon's been tipping the scale on that thing for a minute now. So
The copy you have, Dillon, it looks pretty clean. Describe it. But is it
it's nice. It's so it's like the disc is, I think you probably would still call it VG plus. There's some lines on it, but I'm telling you, it powers through. It's like you can't even hear it. Just the record is so strong, and it's so loud. It's such a loud mix that even if you had like a VG copy, it will probably still play fine. But it's a great copy. I'm happy with it. I don't really ever feel like I'd never ever need to upgrade it. It's a nice one. And the guy who found this at a yard sale made out like a bandit, and so did I. So everyone's happy. And also, like, he shipped it and he forgot to get a tracking number.
Oh my
God. It's just like out there for like 2 weeks, and I didn't even know if it was coming, and I had sent him PayPal friends and family like an idiot. Anyways.
I don't need that kind of stress in my life.
It's bad, man. It was so stupid. I just wanted it so bad.
I mean, you know what's crazy though? We've had like guys that we've done licenses for Brown Asset on, and they'd be like, "Yeah, we didn't have a copy of the 45." They sent us like I got 145 in the mail. It was no sleeve. It was just the 45 in a Ziploc baggie, and then like in a regular envelope, and they just sent it in the mail, and it was fine. And it was like, and I was like. And like over here, we're like boxing everything up all crazy, and then something still shows up fucked up, and somebody's like super pissed, and I'm like, so I don't. It's weird how that happens sometimes.
Dear Lord, and Lance, how did you come across your copy? I'm assuming you only have one, yeah.
Only one, yeah. At the moment, I got really well. I don't know if I would call myself lucky, but at the most recent Den Bosch record fair in the Netherlands, day one, first stall I stop at, everybody's going nuts through the crates, and there's nothing on this guy's wall yet. He starts loading records up onto the wall, and the first one that goes into the top is this one. And I'm like, no fucking way. Unbelievable. But on the back there, if you can see that, just says offer. Like, all right. So there's no price on this thing. He wants to negotiate. So rewind 2 or 3 months ago, and I've never seen one in the flesh. Like Jeffrey Weiss is always talking about how, like, yeah, people offered them to me all the time back in the 90s for $1,000. I could have gotten a dozen of them, whatever, And maybe that's how it was back in the day. And people know him to be that kind of collector and that kind of buyer. Well, I was at the Orange County Record Fair. Literally, a dealer pulls a copy out of a box and hands it to the guy standing right in front of me. And he's like, you want this? He's like, yep. And he paid, I don't know, like $3,000 or something, like a pretty hefty sum, but a really, really reasonable price for it. And I was like, dude, right in front of me. It was like inches away from my grasp. And I would have looked without question, wouldn't have even looked at the vinyl and thrown $3,000 at it. Well, I asked the guy in the Netherlands, I was like, all right, what's it going to take to just get this done? Because I got to get back out there into the record fair because I got work to do. I need to get this transaction out of the way. And he said, well, I already have an offer for $5,000. And I was like, okay, what's the get the deal done price? He said 6K euros. So even more. But either way, I couldn't pass it up. I would have kicked myself for the rest of my life if I passed it up and I couldn't get a copy. So I paid €1,000.
Well, when they hit you with that euro, you come up with the negotiation, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, euros." You're like, "Dang it."
Yeah.
But that's how these kinds of things are. Dylan, you know this just as well as I do. Daniel do to Nate. I'm sure you do as well. Sometimes there's these grails that come up, and if they get offered to you, you just have to pull the trigger because you may or may not ever see that record again in your lifetime. I spent 17 years of owning a record store and never saw a Moonblood on any wall in any record store at any record fair or in any collection outside of Jeffrey Weiss's. And obviously I know Dillon owns one and a handful of other friends that don't want to sell them. You just have to pay the price. And, you just skip a few meals, work a little, work 40 more hours that week and do whatever you have to do to make sure that you just file that thing away, knowing that it's in your possession. This is a part of my autobiographical record collecting story now that Daniel and I have been working together on these kinds of reissues. I can't not have an OG of the things that he and I have worked together on and or the things that I've reissued on permanent outside of Stonewall, which I probably will never own. That's a $14,100 record as of many years ago.
Dylan, do you have an OG Stonewall?
I have 3 of them. No, I don't have them.
Got them at $2 at a yard sale.
Dude, I don't know if I think I told Lance this. I think I called him when it happened, but this guy called me and said he had an original Stonewall. He found it in a house that had been abandoned, and I went to go look at it, and it totally was a bootleg.
Did it say Permanent Records on it?
The first time I was offered a Randy Holden Population 2 was a bootleg where you could, and he was swore up and down, this is OG, man, I guarantee it. And I'm like, you can see the photocopy of where the drill hole went through the jacket. You're like, they don't print drill holes into album art, dude. Like, no way. And that was a Den Bosch record fair experience too. And it was the first table I went to. I was like, dude, I'm buying that. And, you gotta, mind your P's and Q's because you can really, really get yourself into trouble. Because it's very hard to tell the difference between an OG and a bootleg sometimes. Absolutely.
So, Danny, you've been, no doubt, wanting to work with Fraction for years. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, so when Lance and I started doing the brown acid stuff, we just, we have kind of had a massive hit list of things like that. We're just like, yeah, it'd be sick to get this. Yeah, well, that's private shit. Well, we should try to get that. Or, oh, that one maybe be tough because the major label put that out. So that's a long shot list. But yeah, and we definitely talked about it. It was always a long shot. And sometimes long shots come in, you know what I mean? So it happened. Lance had been persistent on Jim, and it's not the first time that it took multiple tries. I mean, it wasn't like it didn't happen right out of the gate. Like it was, the groundwork. It took years. Lance, what was the first year that you reached out to Jim?
I've been after Moonblood for a long time, and I knew Jeffrey was in touch with Jim at some point because of the Mexican Summer release, and his contact was the contact number was disconnected. So it took going through all sorts of other back avenues and then getting Jim on the phone immediately. He was like, nah, I'm not interested. Thanks. And just like with brown acid, sometimes it takes a massive amount of consistent persistence. And that's something that
and a cash offer,
a labor of love for me,
and a cash offer. So there,
you got to make the phone call right in January when the Christmas bills are coming in. That's the
pretty much.
Jim doesn't need the money. He said that more than once. So it wasn't really a matter of how much we were willing to offer him. He just wanted to work with people that he thought would do a good job with the release.
Yeah, he said the most important thing to him was definitely making sure that we stayed true to the original packaging as much as possible. And he didn't want a cheap version of it coming out. And that's that's something that, you know, we take very seriously, which is why it's taken literally like 9 fucking months to get this jacket spin. But we're getting there.
Has he seen anything? Have you sent him a test pressing, anything like that? No.
Doesn't seem to be interested. Just like semi-finished copy when it's done.
Pressing, and he was just like, if you're good with it, I'm good with it.
Yeah, dude, we had him. Like we were like, he's like, I trust you guys.
Yeah.
But also we know that if we put out an inferior product that and it gets back to him, he's going to be disappointed in that.
Absolutely. And with something of this stature, and we have to make sure that like it's as good as it can be. You know, there's, you know, people want this record, and we want to do it right. We don't want no bullshit out there.
I don't think it's in your guys' makeup to even look to compromise on not just Fraction, but, you know, any of the other products. So
yeah.
So okay. So talk to me about the pressings that you have on Writing Easy. Now I believe there's some Writing Easy versions. There's special Noble versions as well. Talk me through what that looks like.
Yeah. So we have a few pressings going on here. So the Writing Easy and permanent colors will be the black and crystal clear. So there'll be 500 black and 500 crystal clear. That will be our color. Dillon and Noble Records is doing 1,000 red opaque copies. We are also doing Vinyl Me Please has a kind of like pearl blue. Theirs is limited to 300. And then we did a crazy red, black, and white splatter that's limited to 100. That will go on sale as well on May 31st, pre-sale anyways. And then we also did a Die Hard box, which is a clear red, black, and some white splatter on that version. And that the box comes with a Fraction poster, a bumper sticker, a pin, and a patch of the artwork. So, and yeah, so those are the first pressing is 2,500 copies. All in all, like that's what the total pressing is.
Far out. And they will be shipping in June, you said.
Yeah. So the idea is that pre-sale will kick off on May 31st. We feel very confident that we will have records before the end of June, and that should get everybody their respective copies to start shipping to their customers by the end of June.
Wow.
That's where we're at with it. It's been sitting there. We got the stampers are made, the colors are pulled aside, the inserts are there, the hype stickers are there. Everything is there. We just need them jackets, and we're ready to party, dude. We even have the splatter records here already. This has been something that's been in the works for a hot minute. It'll be great to get this out into the world and stop talking about it and being about it.
Well, man, that's phenomenal. And look, I'm so glad you guys shared that information here on the show. All right,
okay,
gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here. And again, very exciting. This feels like a big milestone. And I know, Dillon, you've proselytized about this record for years. Lance, I'm glad you finally got yourself a copy as well. And Daniel, when you told me that this was coming out, you were as proud as I've ever seen you be. So,
oh my God, yeah. I mean, this is a huge feather in the cap, and super psyched to have it coming out and Writing Easy.
Yeah,
for sure.
Oh, and it's a perfect.
Thank you for all your promo too, and taking time to talk to us about it. There's not that many places on the web that we can do this, and this is the perfect spot for that. So
I appreciate that. Look, I mean, there's nothing I like doing better than just hanging out with a bunch of record nerds and talking about rare things that, we may never see in the flesh. I'm glad you guys have some. But I'm going to put links to this episode page, obviously, for being able to purchase this. There's going to be at Writing Easy, I think. I love how when we're talking, and then Dillon, he does this kind of Vanna White thing, where he pulls things up and he's showing, he's giving the visuals, the eye candy.
It's amazing.
The booklets, yes.
Yeah, he came prepared. He's got fucking props.
Yeah, he's like the Carrot Top of record collecting. But there's going to be links to Noble Records to be able to order copies. There's going to be special ones you can get at Permanent. Of course, you can get them online, or you.
Writing.
Yep, and
then Vinyl Me Please as well. So there's not one place on the web that you can buy all the versions. You're going to have to do some digging around, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah,
right?
you're going to have to move quick on May 31st. Yeah, that's right. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And, we look forward to seeing what else is in the bag of tricks. I'm sure now you guys have conquered this mountain. There's a couple more in sight.
Only time will tell.
Cool. All right.
So,
Thanks, Nate. We'll see you here in LA pretty soon.
Absolutely.
Yes, and thank you, Nate, for bringing people, record collectors and vinyl aficionados from Los Angeles, North Carolina, and Australia all together at the same time. That's
amazing
of itself.
Yeah, thank you so much,
All
Nate.
good, man. My pleasure.
I always love talking to each one of those guys, and having all three of them on the line at the same time is an absolute blessing. So thank you, gentlemen, for making time for us. And again, reminder to everyone, Friday, May 31st, 2024, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern time, writingeasyrex.com, noblerecordstore.com, permanentrecordsla.com. And of course, don't forget there is an extended version of this interview, an extra 15 or 20 minutes or so, more details, discussion on the rare Stonewall album. That's up at patreon.com/vinyl guide. Join us there, help support the show, and that would be much appreciated. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media. Those of you who are putting them up on Reddit forums or Facebook groups, putting them on your socials, that is always hugely appreciated. And those of you who are leaving positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, well, I can't thank you enough. Big, wet, sloppy kiss to each of you. Mwah. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.